The next section you'll need to have in your proposal is called the methodology. And the methodology may sound like a big fancy word, but the only thing a methodology is it's asking you, how are you going to complete this research? So it just wants to know, what's your strategy for conducting an investigation in order to answer your research question? Now, the chart I have here for you actually shows you all the different kinds of ways that you can actually get this research and start forming an understanding of the issue so that you can write your research paper. You'll see that a lot of the ones that you see here on this chart are actually primary research. Primary research, in a nutshell, means it's the kind of information that you have gotten for yourself. It isn't that someone else got the data for you and that they've interpreted the data and they're telling you, because that's what sources do. If you have an expert or a scholar that wrote a paper on the criminalization of poor people in urban areas. Well, that article has probably gotten some data from somewhere else, and the authors have interpreted that data and they've given their opinion about the criminalization of poor people in those areas. That's secondary information. You want primary information. And these methods on this chart are some of the ways that you can get primary information. So you can do interviews. An interview, of course, means that you're setting up a meeting with you and another person, and you're going to talk in depth about that person's experience. In depth is very important. The interview is what separates itself from, or the in-depth nature of it separates the interview from a questionnaire or a survey, for instance. So in an interview, you'll ask a lot of follow-up questions about that person's experience. You're going to get longer answers in an interview, and you'll probably get more varied answers in an interview. So interviews are very important as primary research because you can get deep material from individuals. In a survey, on the other hand, you're trying to get responses from as many people as possible because you want to see a sample of what people know. So instead of going up and down as an interview will go to go deeper, surveys and questionnaires tend to go horizontally because we want to see what the responses are from a lot of people about a lot of questions. And the questions don't tend to go as deeply as the interview questions go. And you guys have had some experience collecting survey questions because you've gone out and done a couple of surveys just on campus, really informal ones. There are also observations. Now, in an observation, what you're doing is you're not actually talking to anyone at this point. You want to see a process or an act happen. So, for instance, if you are looking at the criminalization of the poor in Ferguson, Missouri, what you might do is travel to Ferguson and hang out at a spot where you know a lot of people get speeding tickets. And you just hang out there for 3 or 4 days, perhaps, and you're just watching. You're watching as the cops pull people over and give them speeding tickets, and you're going to notice certain things about that process. So you'll notice things like what's the race or the gender, if you can get any cues about the economic status of the person who's being pulled over. Are they in an old beat up car? Does it look like, or did they sound like they told you where they worked or how much they made? No matter what it is, you're going to try and stay out of the situation as much as you can and just view it. Once you become a part of that situation, you could change it. And so this is a tricky area for researchers. Observation means you need to be kind of disconnected from what's going on while still looking in and seeing what's going on. Focus groups, that's another way of collecting information, of collecting data for your research. Focus groups are a little different. They're a cross between something like interviews and surveys, actually, in terms of the number of people you'll question and the kinds of questions you'll ask. A focus group, you usually have a few people, 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 people, but you're actually going to sit down with them and you're going to ask them some questions. And some of the questions you'll drill down pretty deeply on. You want to find more information, but you want to find it from a group of people instead of just one person at a time. And focus groups are really good when you're trying to find out certain attitudes, perhaps, that a group of people will have as opposed to just one person. For instance, I did research a few years ago about Somali women, Somali Muslim women who were students at a college I was teaching. And I was trying to find out more information from this group of women about their experiences at our college. And I tried to figure out some of the cultural challenges that they have being students at this college. Interviewing them as a group was really good for me because I got to hear a lot about the culture and I got to hear in that one meeting how many experiences these women shared, as opposed to going one at a time, doing individual interviews. And sometimes the questions in the group are much more interesting, the ones that they ask each other are much more interesting than the ones that I came up with for the focus group. This is another good reason to have a focus group as part of your research. Case studies are another way for a person to find out what's going on by looking at information that's been collected but not interpreted. So, for instance, in Ferguson, we know that recently there was a Department of Justice report that was released. And in that Department of Justice report, there are certain pieces of data and certain people that they've actually profiled in the report because they actually collected information about these individuals to give people a bigger idea of what's going on in the city of Ferguson. Those things that are inside of the Department of Justice report would be considered case studies. So we could look at what's going on in individual cases, and then you can extrapolate, which means pull out information from that and create some sort of interpretation of your own about what's going on. The last area we have here in the methodology chart would be document reviews. Document reviews are when you find first-hand documents. That means documents that have not already been interpreted and given to you. So if you found an article about the Declaration of Independence, that's different from your actually reading the Declaration of Independence for yourself, right? That's the difference. So you want to have a lot of first-hand accounts, and those documents that have been written, the actual things, the actual pieces of data that have been written and not interpreted are really good pieces of information because you can go and look at those documents and you may find something that another scholar has not found, and you can talk about the information you found directly in that document. So document reviews are another really great way of finding out information and using that information to support the argument you're trying to make. Another very important section that you will need in your proposal is the timeline. Now, the timeline is a way for you to visually keep track of what you need to do to complete the research project. It also shows me what you plan to do in your research project and when you plan to do it. Now, I know that sounds really confusing, so I'll show you a couple of sample timelines, and then I'll show you there are online calculators that can help you come up with a timeline just by putting in the start date of your research and the end date of your research and the kind of research you're doing. So first, let's look at the basic sample. Now, this is a very basic sample. You can find it at thebedfordresearcher.com. And this is just a simple project timeline. So you'll notice it says in your research log, start a project timeline like the one shown here. You may have some steps that are slightly different, but in general, this is what this person has created. So you'd say, okay, I'm going to select my topic. Here's the date that I'm going to start thinking about the topic. Here's the date that I'm going to have a selected topic. And then you can put notes down here. So it'll be about something about Ferguson, Missouri. Then the student has to say, how long is it going to take me to find the sources on my topic and kind of do the research to help me understand the topic better, the kinds of questions I should ask, those kinds of things. How long will that take? So maybe for this student, they say, okay, I'm going to start and I'm going to use 1 week. So this will be the beginning of the week, and I'm going to complete my preliminary exploration by the end of the week. Maybe on the same day that this topic gets explored, is finished being explored, this person will say, I'm going to narrow my topic. So it's going to start on that Friday and it's going to end on Friday. I'm going to narrow my topic down so that I have one centralized and focused area. So the next thing I'm going to do is develop my research question. Maybe this will take me 2 days in order to develop my research question. So I'll put Monday down here, and Wednesday I'll put the dates down. Monday, and then by Wednesday I want to develop my research question. And then you would go on all the way down to when you know you're going to write your first draft and review and revise your draft, editing and designing your document, all the way down to submitting. This person would come up with the dates. I expect you to come up with the dates as well, all the way down to when the essay is due. Well, let's go back and we'll take a look at a guided sample. And you'll see that this one is a little bit more in depth, but maybe a little bit easier to read. So this person has a number of months in order to complete their research, which you won't have, obviously. But you can see they've ordered their research timeline in a little bit different way. They put the month. Maybe for you, you can put the dates, the start and the end dates. The project goal, what do I need to do? The related objective, what little things do I need to do in order to complete this goal? Again, what kinds of activities will I need to do in order to complete the goal? And then my expected completion date, when do I hope to get this done? And then who needs to be responsible? Now you can tell for this one, usually the person responsible column is when you're doing group work. That way you'll know which people in the group need to complete something. So for you, you wouldn't need to have the person responsible column. But the date or the month, the goal, the objective, the activity, the completion date, very much sounds like something that you could do for your research. Now, like I said before, there are some online calculators that you can use that can help you determine what your timeline is. So this is from Baylor University in Texas. And you will notice it asks, when will you begin the assignment? I'm going to put in a due date of 4/25, and this is just an example. And we'll see what we come up with. So this is what the research paper planner timeline is for Baylor. If we say we're starting on the 24th and we're ending on April 25th, it says we have 31 days to finish. And then you'll notice it gives you the steps, it gives you the date, it gives you the activity. So by tomorrow, or the day that our Wednesday class, you would need to understand the assignment according to Baylor. If you were to click on that, it will give you more information about what they mean by understanding the assignment. Okay. So you'll notice step 2 says select and focus your topic. Step 3 is establish a research question. That's by Thursday. By Friday, you would need to design your research strategy. So let's click on that and see what that means. Designing the research strategy means getting background information, gathering information, creating an information timeline, and preparing your search for resources. So Baylor University gives you a lot of information for each of your steps, but then you can just print this off and you can attach it or somehow take a picture of this and attach this to your proposal so that I would have a way of seeing, and look, there's a printer-friendly version, I would have a way of seeing what your timeline is and what you plan to do. Now there's one other one here. This is Tufts University. And you can tell they show you can start a new project. Again, we'll say 3/25. When is the paper due? We'll say 4/25. Then it says choose the subject. So we're going to say it's in English. And now let's see what it says. And you'll notice the research steps are here. So you're going to get started on the 26th, find background information on the 28th, develop a research question by the 30th, avoid plagiarism by the 31st, which is funny. You should avoid plagiarism the whole way through. You're going to research your project and be done with that by 4/6. You're going to plan your paper by the 9th, write your first draft by the 15th, and all the way down to completing your paper on the 25th. But as you can see, the research paper navigators, both from Baylor and from Tufts, give you an easy way to see how you can complete your work. And it will give you that timeline, which, as I said, is what you'll need to have when you're ready to hand in your proposal. So that's all we have for today. Here are some sample proposals. So let's look at the sociology proposal. And you'll notice this one is for dissertation research. So you're not to the level of doing dissertation research, but that doesn't mean we can't get good ideas from the proposal that this person created. So you'll notice this person has a project summary. You'll see a problem statement, right? So here's their clear statement of the problem. They're talking about ethnic diversity, distribution of resources, ethnic conflict, and assimilation cannot be understood in terms of neatly packaged identities in competition. So they're starting to explain this is what our problem is when it comes to trying to figure out what happens in terms of identity switching. Identity switching is when people of multiple ethnic identities have to switch from one cultural viewpoint or worldview to another in order to deal with the different groups that they belong to in the world. So as an African American woman, I might have a home identity that is much more Southern and more African American in its roots. And then my public identity might be a little bit more mainstream, where the way I speak changes, the way I behave in public may change. That's what identity switching is. So this person is going to talk about how this happens when a person has to deal with multiple ethnic identities in everyday situations. Okay. Anyway, so they're giving an overview of their methods and analysis. They're giving an overview of the intellectual merit, which means why do people who care and who think about things want to think about this. And then here are the impacts. This is the significance. This is why this person is saying we need to study this because it has these impacts. And again, here's a better That was the overview. Now we're going to get into a little bit more information about the statement of the problem. We're looking at the research questions and the objectives. And we're seeing some background information here. You will also notice here's the literature review. And the literature review is not short, as you can see. It takes a couple of pages to talk about the literature review. And then we get to the hypotheses. These are the questions that this person wants to answer. And then you see that they give an explanation of where they're going to do the research and who they're going to research. And then they actually give the timeline. Here's the research plan overview. Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. Here, the sampling means that they're going to give more information about who they're going to talk to and how that's going to happen. And in Phase 2, who they're going to talk to and how that's going to happen. And in Phase 3. They also talk about how they're going to collect the data and what kind of data they're going to collect, and how they're going to analyze this data. Now, these things are not the things that you would necessarily have to do. All I want you to do in your methodology section, which is essentially what this is to tell me what you plan to do to find the information that will help you answer your questions and write your paper. Okay. Let's go back. Let's look at the economics proposal. And here you will see another dissertation research project. But this one has the project summary, the broader impacts. This is the significance. And then this is a bigger problem statement explaining what's going on and what's it about. A little bit more background. Now notice this still is talking about addressing the problem, right? Giving the background information about this problem. So even though it's in its own little area, it's still describing the clear statement of the problem. And then here's the literature review. And you see the research design and methodology. Again, how the data is expected to be collected. And here you are, data collection again. How they plan to deal with all of this data, and they are going to collect a lot. How are they going to analyze the data? Here are some broader impacts. These guys decided to talk about ethical considerations because they're going to do so many interviews. They have to think about how are we going to treat the participants, the interviewees in this study. And that's what this discussion is about. And then the research schedule, which of course is another way to say the research timeline. And then there's more information. The project feasibility will talk about who's going to help with the research to make the project more valid. And then there are other things that this person is trying to show. Here are my qualifications in order to do this. And then there's a reference cited page. If you have any other questions about the project proposal, please feel free to send me a text message or a message through our class website. I would like for you to give this a try and to bring your draft to our next class, and we'll talk about it more then.